I had left my white coat in my office and was wearing vintage jeans and a simple cashmere sweater. I walked into the lobby of STJ Medical Center, my mind focused on the board meeting scheduled for Monday. I didn't notice the ring light and tripod set up near the donor wall until I felt a hard shove into my shoulder. "Excuse me, watch where you're going." A shrill voice cut through the air. I stumbled backward. My eyes landed on a young woman wearing a short, tight nurse's dress that definitely violated the dress code. She held a large iced coffee in one hand while fixing her hair with the other. It was Kale, the new intern Terrence had insisted we hire despite her lack of qualifications. I straightened my sweater and calmly said, "Excuse me, you're blocking the main entrance for patients." Kale rolled her eyes while looking at her phone screen, where comments were flying by. She laughed and said, "Nobody cares about patients right now. I'm filming a day in the life vlog of a CEO's wife, and you just ruined my lighting. Move out of the frame. You look off-brand." I blinked, unsure I'd heard her correctly. I stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, who exactly do you think you're talking to?" Kale scoffed, snapping her gum. "I'm talking to a nobody who clearly can't afford to shop where I shop. My husband is Terrence Brooks, the CEO of this hospital. So unless you want to be banned from the property, I suggest you get out of my sight before I call security." The audacity took my breath away. I stood my ground and said, "Oh, really? Well, I think Terrence would be very interested to know that his wife is assaulting people in the lobby." Kale's face twisted with anger. She stepped forward and swung her arm. The lid flew off her cup and hot, sticky liquid splashed across my neck, soaking my cashmere sweater and dripping down my jeans. The heat was shocking, but the humiliation was worse. People in the lobby gasped. The security guards started moving toward us, but Kale threw up her hand and shouted, "Back off. She attacked me. I'm the victim here." I didn't wipe off the coffee. I didn't scream. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, put it on speaker, and dialed Terrence's direct line. He answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "What is it, Vivi?" "I'm in a meeting." I looked directly at Kale and said into the phone, "You need to come to the lobby immediately." Terrence ran a hand over his face and sighed, shaking his head as if I were a spoiled child. "Look, she's young. She's under a lot of pressure, and she brings youthful energy to the hospital's brand. We can't fire her. It would look like a wrongful termination lawsuit waiting to happen. Just apologize to her for scaring her and go change your clothes. You look like a mess." My blood ran cold. "Apologize?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You want the owner of St. Jude to apologize to an intern for being assaulted?" Terrence narrowed his eyes. "I'm the CEO, Vivi. Calm the situation down. Do it for the hospital. Do it for me. If you make a scene, everyone will say you're just a bitter, angry woman harassing a young girl. Is that the reputation you want?" He knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew how hard I worked to maintain a calm, professional image in a field dominated by white men who wanted to see me fail. I looked past him. Kale had already stopped crying and was winking at a passing nurse. That was when I realized this wasn't just about an intern. This was a power game. "Fine," I said, my voice stripped of emotion. "I'll handle it." I stepped out from behind the pillar. Kale smiled smugly, expecting a groveling apology. I walked past her, leaning in just enough so that only she and Terrence could hear me. I whispered, "Enjoy your little vlog, Kale. Make sure you get plenty of footage of the lobby, because you won't be seeing it much longer." I walked toward the elevators, ignoring Terrence as he called my name. I didn't go to my office to change clothes. I went straight to the server room to personally retrieve the security footage. The war had begun, and they had just fired the first shot. The following afternoon, I drove my Mercedes to the gated community where Terrence's brother, Marcus, and his wife, Sarah, lived. Sarah had invited us to a family dinner, claiming it was time to set work aside and strengthen family bonds. I knew Sarah tolerated me only because I had paid off her student loans and purchased the villa she lived in, even though the deed was technically held in a trust controlled by Terrans. Sarah, a woman who prided herself on being a suburban socialite, had always made subtle digs at my career, implying that a woman's true place was supporting her husband, not outshining him. I arrived a few minutes late. When I entered the dining room, the air was filled with laughter. Terrence sat at the head of the mahogany table holding a glass of wine, and seated to his right, in the place of honor normally reserved for a spouse, was Cale. I froze in the doorway, tightening my grip on my clutch purse. Sarah looked up, her smile bright and completely fake. "Oh, Vivi, you made it," she sang out, standing but making no move to greet me. "We were just listening to Cale's ideas for the hospital gala. She's so creative." I looked at the seating arrangement. There were 6 chairs. In this house, in this family, I was the bank account, and Cale was the prize. "So, Vivi," Sarah said while pouring herself more wine, "when are you planning to retire? I mean, you look tired." Cale was just saying the hospital needs a fresh face. You don't want to be the old guard holding back progress, do you? It's okay to step aside and let youth take over. We all know Terrence is the real brain behind the operation anyway. I picked up my fork and looked at Sarah. She was projecting her own insecurities onto me, using her privilege to make me feel small in a house that I had paid for. I was about to respond when the chandelier light caught something shining around Cale's neck. I froze. I narrowed my eyes, focusing on the necklace resting against Cale's collarbone. It was a double-strand South Sea pearl necklace with a distinctive teardrop-shaped diamond and sapphire clasp. My breath caught. That wasn't just any necklace. It was my mother's necklace. The one my father had given her on their 25th anniversary. The one I had reported missing from my safety deposit box 3 weeks earlier. Terrence had told me I had probably misplaced it. That I was becoming forgetful with age. I looked at Terrence. He was laughing at something Cale had whispered. He had stolen my dead mother's jewelry, hung it around the neck of his 21-year-old mistress, and then brought her to a family dinner to flaunt it in my face. "Beautiful pearls, Cale," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. "Where did you get them?" She touched the necklace, beaming. "Oh, Terrence gave them to me. He said they belonged to some old aunt who passed away and that nobody wanted them anymore. He said they deserved to be worn by someone with life and beauty, not locked away in a dark box." The room fell silent. Sarah looked down at her plate, a small smile playing on her lips. She knew. They all knew. Slowly, I placed my napkin on the table. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I simply smiled. A cold, terrifying smile that finally made Terrence look up and meet my eyes. "That's a lovely story," I said, standing up. "Enjoy your dinner. I need to make a phone call." I walked out of the dining room, leaving my meal untouched. When I reached the foyer, I heard Cale ask, "What's her problem?" And I heard Terrence reply, "Ignore her. She's just in a bad mood." I walked out to my car and sat in the silence of the night. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from rage. I pulled out my phone, but this time I didn't call Terrence. I called my private investigator. "I want you to conduct a complete forensic audit of Terrence's spending," I said. "And get me the number for the NYPD's Grand Larceny Division. I have a theft to report." Monday mornings at STJ Medical Center were sacred. The boardroom on the 12th floor was a fortress of silence and serious decision-making, where department heads gathered to discuss mortality rates, budget allocations, and complex surgical schedules. That was my parking space, the one my father had used for 30 years. Cale pulled out a chair. Not just any chair, but the one directly to the right of the CEO's seat. She dropped into it and crossed her legs. Looking around the table at the distinguished surgeons, most of whom had been practicing medicine since before she was born, she flashed a bright, empty smile. So what are we talking about? Boring stuff or fun stuff? I looked at Terrence. He was sitting at the far end of the table looking completely unconcerned. In fact, he looked amused. He leaned back in his leather chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "Kale," I said, my voice low and controlled, "this is an executive board meeting for department heads. You are a first-year intern. You're supposed to be making rounds in the ICU right now. You are not authorized to be in this room." Kale rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Here we go again with the rules." "Terrence, tell her. I told you I have ideas for the hospital. I have vision. You said I could come in." Terrence cleared his throat. The room fell deathly silent. Everyone looked from me to him, waiting for the CEO to enforce protocol, waiting for him to tell this girl to leave so the adults could work. "Let her stay, Vivian," Terrence said casually, as if he were ordering lunch. "Kale represents the next generation. We need fresh perspectives. Go ahead, Kale." What did you want to bring up? A cold knot formed in my stomach. This violated every hospital bylaw, but I knew that if I argued now, I would look like the aggressor. I leaned back and crossed my arms. "Fine. Let's hear it." Kale took a loud sip of her drink, the ice rattling obnoxiously. "Okay, so I looked at my schedule for this month and honestly, it's tragic. You people have me working, like, 60 hours a week. That's not going to work for my brand. I need my weekends free, and I definitely can't keep doing those night shifts. They're bad for my skin, and the lighting in the trauma room is terrible for selfies." Dr. Evans nearly choked on his water. I stared at her, genuinely unable to comprehend that level of delusion. "You are in a surgical residency program, Kale. The state medical board requires 80-hour work weeks. You can't choose your schedule based on your skincare routine." Kale waved a dismissive hand at me. "That's just like a guideline. Terrence said we can work it out. Anyway, the main thing is this Friday. I need the schedule changed because Terrence is taking me to that new spa in the Hamptons for a couples massage and a detox weekend. So I need someone else to cover my trauma shift." The silence that followed was deafening. She had just admitted in front of the entire executive board that the CEO was taking an intern on a romantic getaway while still legally married to the chief of surgery. The disrespect was so palpable it felt like a physical slap across the face. "Don't you dare talk to her like that," Terrence spat, standing to tower over the table. "You are so petty. That's exactly why hospital morale is low. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing someone young and full of life. You're letting your personal jealousy interfere with professional development." "My personal jealousy?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's an intern demanding vacation time in the middle of a residency. That's not jealousy, Terrence. Those are standards. Something you clearly lack. Don't you dare lecture me about standards." Terrence shouted, pointing a finger at me. "I'm the CEO. I run this place, and if I say she needs a break, she gets a break. In fact, since you're so concerned about her reporting to a supervisor, let's solve that right now." He grabbed a legal pad from the center of the table and pulled a gold pen from his pocket. He scribbled furiously, the scratching sound filling the silent room. With immediate effect, Terrence announced, his eyes locked on mine, daring me to challenge him. "Kale is no longer under the supervision of the surgery department." "Promoted to what?" Dr. Evans asked, his voice trembling slightly. "She hasn't even completed her first month." Terrence tore the page from the notepad and slid it down the long table toward Kale. She picked it up, reading it with a widening grin. "She is now the special executive assistant to the CEO," Terrence declared, straightening his tie. "She reports only to me, sets her own schedule, and has the authority to oversee departmental scheduling to ensure work-life balance." Kale clapped her hands. Oh my God. Thank you, babe. I mean, thank you, Mr. Brooks. She looked at me, holding the piece of paper like a weapon. You heard that, Vivian. I'm an executive now, so about that schedule change, I'll just approve it myself. I looked around the room. My colleagues, people I had known for 20 years, stared down at their laps. They were terrified. They saw the madness in Terrence's eyes and knew that speaking up could cost them their pensions. Slowly, I sat back down. The humiliation burned in my throat like bile. My husband had just made his mistress my superior in administrative matters. He had desecrated the profession my father built. But as I looked at Kale, now taking a selfie with her handwritten promotion letter, and Terrence, strutting like a peacock, a strange calm settled over me. They thought this was a victory. They thought they had broken me. I picked up my pen again. I didn't look at Terrence. I looked at the legal pad in front of me. Understood, I said, my voice completely flat. Congratulations on the promotion, Kale. Terrence seemed disappointed. He wanted a fight. He wanted tears. He wanted me to scream so he could call security and label me hysterical. But I gave him nothing. Good, Terrence huffed, sitting back down. I'm glad we're all on the same page. Now let's discuss the budget for the new executive wing renovation. Kale has some ideas for the decor. As Kale began rambling about importing pink marble from Italy, I quietly wrote 3 words on my notepad. Morality clause violation. Terrence had just violated the morality clause in his employment contract in front of 12 witnesses. Terrence threw his hands into the air as though he had just won the Super Bowl. I walked downstairs. My heels echoed across the marble floor. A rhythmic countdown to an explosion. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring guests who tried to stop me and say hello. I walked straight through the front doors and down the driveway just as the car was being unloaded onto the pavement. Terrence was already there, circling the vehicle and running his hands across the hood as though it were a woman's body. Kale was bouncing up and down, squealing. Oh my God, Terrence, she shrieked. It's gorgeous. It matches my nails. I stopped 10 feet away. The music from the house seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the pounding of my own heartbeat. Terrence, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air. He looked up, smiling. His eyes were glazed from champagne and adrenaline. Vivian, look at this beauty. A little birthday indulgence for the CEO, right? You know what they say, work hard, play hard. I raised my phone. You spent $150,000 on a car without discussing it with me, using our joint credit card. Terrence's smile faltered, but only for a second. He waved dismissively. Oh, relax, Vivian. Don't be such a buzzkill. It's a business expense. I need to project the right image. A CEO can't drive around in that old sedan. It hurts the brand. I stepped closer. A business expense? Really? Then why does Kale have the keys? Kale snatched the keys from the delivery driver and dangled them in front of my face. Why? She said, smacking her gum. Because Terrence is so busy running the hospital, I'll need to drive him around. So technically it's for both of us. Besides, he put the title in my name for insurance reasons. Something about liability. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He bought a car with my money and titled it in his mistress's name, in my own driveway, in front of our friends. You put the car in her name? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. Terrence. I stood there among the exhaust fumes, alone in the driveway of the home I had built. The humiliation was complete. They thought they had won. They thought that by embarrassing me, calling me cheap, and mocking my life, they could silence me. They thought I would go upstairs to my room and cry. But the tears never came. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me, sharp and dangerous. I realized then that arguing with parasites was pointless. You don't negotiate with a tapeworm. You remove it. Slowly, I turned around. I didn't go back to the party. I walked around the house into the quiet darkness of the garden. I pulled out my phone again. The fraud alert was still on the screen. I dismissed it and opened my contacts. I scrolled past hospital administrators and attorneys until I stopped on a number I had saved years ago but never used. A number given to me by a patient who worked in federal intelligence. It rang twice. "Hello," a rough voice answered. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "This is Dr. Brooks." "Dr. Brooks," the voice said, sounding surprised. "Is everything all right?" "No," I replied, staring at the moon. "I need to hire you. I need a full investigation, financial, criminal, surveillance, everything." "Who's the target?" he asked. I watched the lights of the party flickering in the distance. "My husband, Terrence Brooks," I said. "And a woman named Cale Jenkins. And while you're at it, investigate my sister-in-law, Sarah Brooks. I want to know where every penny has gone over the last 5 years." "Understood," Dr. Vance said. "When would you like me to start?" I looked at the skid marks in the driveway. "Start now," I said. "I want enough evidence to bury them." I hung up. The night air was cool, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel cold. I felt the warmth of the fire that was about to reduce their entire world to ashes. "Happy birthday, Terrence. Enjoy the car. It's going to be the most expensive ride of your life." The emergency department at STJ Medical Center was usually a symphony of controlled chaos. "Okay, girls," she whispered loudly into her phone. "This is where the magic happens. I'm going to show you the VIP patient I'm treating. Terrence says I'm basically the lead doctor on this case." She pulled back the curtain to Trauma Bay 2. I started running. "Cale, get out of there," I shouted. But the noise of the emergency room drowned me out. I reached the curtain just in time to watch a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Cale stood beside Mr. Henderson's bed. The councilman was unconscious. A breathing tube taped to his mouth connected him to a ventilator that rhythmically pumped oxygen into his lungs. Cale wrinkled her nose while looking at her phone screen. "The tape is ruining the aesthetic. It covers half his face. I can't get a good selfie with him if he looks like a mummy. Hang on, let me fix it so my followers can see who he is." "No, don't touch it," I screamed, lunging forward. But it was too late. Cale reached out with her manicured acrylic nails and tugged on the endotracheal tube. Because she had no medical training, she didn't just remove the tape. She pulled the entire tube out of his airway. The reaction was immediate. The ventilator alarm shrieked a high-pitched warning. The patient's chest stopped rising. The cardiac monitor shifted from green to flashing red as his oxygen saturation levels plummeted. "Oh my God," Cale shrieked, jumping backward as the tube hissed and fell onto the sheets. "It's making a weird noise. Why is he turning blue?" "Code blue in trauma 2. I shouted, slamming the emergency button on the wall. I grabbed the ambu bag from its wall mount and shoved Cale aside so hard she stumbled into the crash cart. "Get out of my way." Medical staff flooded the room. Brenda, the ER's head nurse, rushed in carrying the intubation kit. I acted on instinct. Tilting the patient's head back, I sealed the mask over his face and squeezed the bag, forcing air into his starving lungs. "His oxygen saturation is dropping, Dr. Brooks," Brenda shouted, her eyes wide with terror. 80, 75, he's going into hypoxic arrest. I need suction and an 8.0 tube. "No," I ordered. My hands were steady. My mind was screaming with rage. I glanced up for a split second. Cale was standing in the corner, still holding her phone. She wasn't helping. She was checking her hair in the reflection of a glass cabinet. "Security, get her out," I roared. 2 guards grabbed Cale and her friends, dragging them from the room while she kicked and screamed. "Do you know who I am?" My boyfriend owns this hospital. Let me go. It took 3 agonizing minutes to reintubate the councilman and stabilize his heart rhythm. When his vital signs finally normalized, I slumped against the wall, sweat running down my back. We had nearly lost a city official because an intern wanted an Instagram photo. 10 minutes later, I stormed into the CEO's office on the top floor. I didn't knock. I threw the door open so hard it slammed into the wall. Terrence sat behind his massive oak desk drinking whiskey. Kale was already there. The intern, Miss Kale, she pulled out the tube. "No, Brenda," Terrence interrupted, stepping closer to her. "That's not what happened. You see, if an intern makes a mistake, it's because her supervising nurse failed to monitor her. And if the chief of surgery failed to secure the trauma bay, then it's a systemic failure." I stepped forward. "Don't you dare. Terrence, don't you dare blame Brenda. She was treating a heart attack victim in the next bay." Terrence ignored me. He stared directly at Brenda. "Brenda, you're 2 years away from receiving your full retirement benefits. Correct? You have a sick husband at home who depends on our health insurance." Brenda nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Brooks. This is what's going to happen," Terrence said, sliding a typed document across the desk. "You're going to sign this incident report. It states that you instructed Kale to adjust the tube and that you and Dr. Brooks turned away, allowing the accident to occur. It was a communication failure among senior staff. Kale was acting under orders." They clinked their glasses. To the Cayman Islands, they cheered. I sat there in the shadows, my heart beating against my ribs like a war drum. I looked down at my phone. The recording was running. Every word. Every conspiracy. Every confession. I stopped the recording and immediately uploaded it to the encrypted cloud server that Mr. Henderson had set up. I looked at them one last time. They looked so happy, so confident in their cruelty. "Enjoy the champagne," I whispered into the empty air, "because it's the last drink you'll have as free women." I stood and slipped back into the shadows of the hallway. I didn't leave the club. I went directly to the private office at the back of the suite, where there was a secure telephone line. I dialed a number I had memorized from the file Mr. Henderson had given me. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crime Division," a voice answered. "My name is Dr. Vivian Brooks," I said, my voice as steady as stone. "I have a priority 1 tip regarding an ongoing wire fraud scheme. The transfer is scheduled for midnight, and I have the confession recorded." I hung up and looked at my watch. It was 4 p.m. They had 8 hours left, and I was going to let them enjoy every minute of it until the clock struck 12. The following Wednesday afternoon, the atmosphere in my executive suite was shattered by the sound of sobbing. This wasn't the quiet, dignified grief of a family member receiving bad news about a patient. Her hair was disheveled, and she clutched a designer handbag that I knew cost more than a nurse's monthly salary. "Vivian, please," Sarah gasped, collapsing into the chair across from my desk. "You have to help me. They're going to hurt me. They're going to hurt Marcus." I slowly set down my pen. "Who's going to hurt you, Sarah?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "These investors. I borrowed some short-term money. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Kale told me about this new cryptocurrency launch. She said Terrence invested and doubled his money in a week. She said I was stupid if I didn't get in too. So I borrowed $50,000 from a private lender because Marcus wouldn't let me touch our savings." I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. "Let me get this straight. So you took financial advice from a 21-year-old intern who thinks the Cayman Islands are a brand of salad dressing and borrowed money from loan sharks to fund it?" Sarah nodded frantically. "The coin crashed this morning, Vivian. It's worth 0. It was a rug pull. And the men called me an hour ago. They said if I don't have the $50,000 plus $20,000 in interest by Saturday night, they'll come for the house. They said they'll break Marcus's legs. She reached across the desk and grabbed my hand with her sweaty fingers. Viv, you have millions. 50,000 is nothing to you. Please, just write me a check. I'll pay you back. I swear. We're family. You can't let them hurt us. I looked at her hand resting on mine. I remembered her laughing in the country club driveway while the security guard tried to throw me out. I remembered the red dress she wore to my father's funeral. I remembered her telling me to hand over my shares. I pulled my hand away as if she had burned me. I'm not a bank, Sarah, I said coldly. And I'm certainly not an ATM for people who despise me. You and Kale are so close. Ask her for the money. Or ask Terrence. He's the CEO, isn't he? Sarah groaned. I can't tell Terrence. He'll kill me. And Kale won't answer my messages. Viv, please. Be the bigger person. Don't be so heartless. Heartless. I repeated, standing up. You called me a bitter, barren woman in front of my entire staff. You helped my husband humiliate me. You conspired to steal my inheritance. And now you want my help. Get out of my office, Sarah. Fix it yourself. Sarah's face changed instantly. The tears vanished, replaced by a look of pure venom. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. Fine, she spat. Have it your way. But don't think you're getting out of this clean. If you don't give me that money, I'll make sure there isn't a single person in this city who respects you. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the diplomas on my wall rattled. I thought she was bluffing. I was wrong. By Thursday morning, the rumors had spread through the hospital like a virus. I walked into the doctor's lounge for coffee, and 3 residents immediately stopped talking and looked down at their phones. I heard giggling in the elevator. Finally, my head nurse, Brenda, pulled me aside. Dr. Brooks, she whispered painfully, you need to see this. She opened Facebook. There, on the community page of the prestigious Hills Homeowners Association, was a post by Sarah. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. It breaks my heart to see a prominent doctor at St. Jude abusing her power. Forcing young male interns to sleep with her in exchange for recommendations is a new level of depravity. We need to protect our young people from predators in positions of authority. The comments were exploding. I didn't call a lawyer to sue Sarah for defamation. That would take too long. Sarah needed to be stopped. I called Mr. Vance, my private investigator. Find out who holds Sarah Brooks's debt, I said. I want a name and a phone number within an hour. 40 minutes later, Mr. Vance texted me a number. It belonged to a shell company used by a notorious local loan sharking syndicate known for aggressive collection tactics. I called the number. A man with a thick, raspy voice answered. Yes, this is Dr. Vivian Brooks, I said. You hold a promissory note belonging to Sarah Brooks. $50,000 principal. $20,000 in interest. There was a pause. You calling to pay for her, lady? Time's running out. I'm calling to make a business transaction, I said, my voice cutting through the static. I'll transfer the full $70,000 immediately today. I could practically hear the man smiling through the phone. Smart move. We like prompt payment. But there's a condition. Go on. I'm not paying off her debt. I'm buying it. You'll transfer the promissory note and the lien on her collateral to me. I want to become the legal holder of her debt. The man laughed. You want to be the shark. I like your style, doctor. As long as the check clears, I don't care who breaks her legs. I transferred the money 10 minutes later. By Friday afternoon, the legal documents were sitting in my inbox. I now own Sarah. I owned the debt secured against her house, the very house I had effectively purchased for them and allowed them to live in through a complicated lease-to-own arrangement, which she had just violated by taking out a second lien. I sat in my leather chair as the sun began setting over the Chicago skyline. I pulled up Sarah's contact information. She had blocked me on social media after posting her lies, but she hadn't blocked my phone number. She expected me to give in and send her the money. I typed a message. "Hi, Sarah. I saw your Facebook post. Very creative. I also had a conversation with your friends at the loan agency. Good news. They won't be coming after you anymore." I paused, imagining her reading that line, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Then I typed the next part. "Bad news. I bought your debt. I'm now your creditor. And unlike the loan sharks, I know exactly where you live because I own the deed. You have until Saturday night at midnight to pay me the full $70,000. If you fail to do so, I will exercise my right to foreclose on your house immediately. You and Marcus will be out on the street by Sunday morning. P.S. I charge late fees." I press send. I watched the delivery receipt change from sent to read. Then the 3 dots of a typing bubble appeared. They disappeared. Then they appeared again. My phone rang. It was Sarah. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights come alive. She wanted a predator. She had just found one. But I didn't hunt for sex or power. I hunted for justice. And the hunt was only beginning. Monday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. Sarah had gone completely silent since I purchased her debt. She was terrified, knowing that one wrong move would leave her homeless. With my sister-in-law neutralized, I turned my attention to the head of the snake, Terrence. I walked into his office, which had once been my father's office, and found him standing over a large architectural blueprint spread across his desk. He looked manic, his eyes wide and feverish. Like a man trying to escape an avalanche by building a snowman. "Vivian, good, you're here," Terrence said without looking up. "We need to talk about Saturday." "Speaking of money, that's the other thing." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an invoice from a luxury event planning company. The total at the bottom was $500,000. "We need to upgrade the venue decorations," Terrence said. "Kale wants white orchids imported from Thailand. She wants a champagne tower that reaches the ceiling, and she wants a private performance from a Grammy-winning artist. The hospital accounts are currently tied up in the audit you ordered, so I need you to write a personal check to cover this." I picked up the invoice. $500,000. For a party celebrating his mistress. "You want me to pay for the event where you're promoting your girlfriend?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Terrence laughed nervously. "Don't call her that. It's professional. And yes, I want you to pay for it. Consider it an investment in your family's legacy. If the hospital fails, your shares become worthless. So really, you're paying to save yourself." He leaned closer, his cologne almost suffocating. "And one more thing, Vivian. You'll write the check, but you won't speak on stage. In fact, it's probably best if you stay in the VIP box. We don't want to confuse donors with mixed messages. This evening is about the future. You represent the past." The insult hung in the air. Heavy. Toxic. He was asking me to finance my own removal. He wanted my money, but he wanted me invisible. In any other universe, I would have thrown the paper in his face. I would have screamed. But I wasn't playing his game anymore. I was playing a game whose rules he didn't even know. I looked at the invoice. Then I looked at Terrence. "You're right," I said softly. Terrence blinked in surprise. "I am." "Yes." "Go on. The hospital needs a fresh start. And if this gala is going to save the legacy my father built, then no expense should be spared." I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. Not just any checkbook. The one connected to the family trust account, the specific account that Mr. Henderson and the FBI had frozen at 9 o'clock that morning as part of an active embezzlement investigation. I opened the checkbook. Uncapped my pen. The scratching sound of the tip moving across paper was the only sound in the room. $500,000. I signed my name with a flourish. "Here you go, Terrence," I said, tearing out the check and handing it to him. "Make it a night to remember." Terrence took the check. His eyes lit up with greed. He didn't check the account number. He didn't ask whether the funds were available. I went to the hospital's print center in the basement. I had some special printing to do. I sat down at a computer and opened the gala guest list. I scrolled past the donors, politicians, and socialites. I reached the section labeled Board of Directors. Terrence had instructed the secretary not to invite the full board because he feared they would ask questions about the budget. He had invited only his loyal supporters. I clicked Select All. I printed 50 new invitations on cream-colored cardstock. But these were not the standard invitations Terrence had sent out. These contained a small handwritten note at the bottom. Agenda item number 1. Immediate vote of no confidence. I slipped the invitations into envelopes. My hands moved with mechanical precision. But I wasn't finished. I had 2 more invitations to address. I picked up a pen and wrote the first name. Special Agent David Vance, FBI, White Collar Crime Division. Then the second. District Attorney Marcus Thorne. I sealed the envelopes. Ran my thumb over the embossed hospital logo. Terrence wanted a phoenix rising. He wanted a fire. Well, I was going to give him one. But he had forgotten something. When a phoenix rises, it burns everything around it to ashes. I walked to the mailbox outside the hospital. The metallic sound of the mailbox door opening echoed like a judge's gavel. I dropped the letters inside. I checked my watch. It was 5 p.m. The check I had given Terrence would take 48 hours to process. By the time the bank flagged it as a frozen asset, the flowers would already be ordered, the champagne would already be poured, and Terrence would already be standing on stage. He was about to bounce a $500,000 check in front of the entire city. And that would be the least of his problems. I walked toward my car, humming a tune my father used to whistle. The trap had been set. The bait had been taken. All I had to do now was dress for the massacre. The countdown to the Phoenix Rising Gala had officially begun, and the hospital buzzed with nervous energy that felt more like the prelude to a disaster than a celebration. While Terrence was busy yelling at florists about the exact shade of white orchids, and Sarah was desperately trying to raise money to save her house, I retreated to my sanctuary. I maintained a private executive suite on the top floor of the hospital, separate from my office. It was a place where I could shower after a 30-hour surgery, sleep when the weather was too bad to drive home, and keep a wardrobe of formal clothing for last-minute donor dinners. Inside that dressing room hung a garment that was more than fabric to me. It was a custom emerald green silk gown created by a fashion house in Paris. I had flown to France 2 years earlier for the fittings. It had cost $40,000. It was the dress I wore the night I accepted the Surgeon of the Year award. Elegant. Floor length. Commanding respect. Since Terrence had forbidden me from appearing on stage, I had decided to wear it to the gala anyway. I would sit in the VIP box looking like a queen, reminding everyone that while Terrence held the microphone, I held the crown. I entered my code into the door of my private suite. The light turned green, but when I opened the door, I felt a strange draft. The air inside, which normally smelled of lab equipment and sterile cleaning supplies, faintly carried cheap vanilla perfume and hairspray. My stomach turned. I went straight to the closet. The door was wide open. My eyes scanned the racks. My lab coats were there. My spare suits were there, but the space where I had hung the emerald dress was empty. The velvet hanger lay on the floor, snapped in half. I found this old dusty dress in a hospital storage closet. It was huge and looked like a grandma curtain, so I decided to do a little DIY project. Watch this transformation. She stepped back from the camera. My breath caught. She was wearing my dress, my $1,000 Paris silk dress. But it was no longer floor length. Kale grabbed kitchen scissors. With a giggle, she seized the silk hem. "It's too long," she told her followers. "We need to show some leg." I watched in horror as she cut through the fabric. The serrated blade sliced through delicate silk handmade by artisans. She cut it up to mid-thigh, turning a regal gown into a cheap, uneven mini dress. "There we go," she said, spinning for the camera. The raw edges were already fraying. She grabbed safety pins and began adjusting the bodice, pulling it tight across her chest. "Now it fits. What do you think? Do I look like the queen of something or what?" Comments flooded in. Fire emojis. Praise. Hype. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from grief. It was adrenaline, the calm precision of a predator seeing prey step into a trap. She had just recorded herself stealing property worth over $10,000. In Illinois, that was a Class 2 felony. She had recorded herself destroying it. And she admitted she found it in hospital storage, confirming unauthorized access to my private suite. I took screenshots. Then I clipped the part where she cut the dress. I watched her pose in the ruins of my dress and whispered into the empty room. "Wear it well, Kale. That dress is going to be the most expensive mistake of your life." My laptop pinged. Priority email. Subject: Final audit report completed. Sender: Vance Forensic Accounting. My heart stopped and then hit again, heavier. I opened it. 50 pages of bank codes, shell companies, routing numbers. But the executive summary said everything. Mr. Vance had traced Blorazen Medical Supply. Found the invoices. And then something worse. Terrence hadn't just been skimming profits. He had been diverting restricted grant funds, specifically from the Pediatric Oncology Medication Fund. I read it twice. $3 million allocated for cisplatin chemotherapy for the Children's Cancer Ward had been diverted on February 14th to a Cayman Islands account. As a result, the hospital inventory showed a critical shortage of life-saving drugs for 25 pediatric patients. The room tilted. These weren't just thieves. They were monsters. Terrence had bought himself a Porsche and a penthouse with money meant to save children with leukemia. He was literally killing children to fund a midlife crisis. A tear slid down my cheek. Not sadness, mourning for the man I thought I had married. That man was dead. I printed everything. Screenshots, audit report, placed them in a black leather folder. Then I called the FBI agent handling my case. "Agent Vance," I said, my voice cold. "Dr. Brox," he replied. "We're reviewing your files." "This is extensive." "I have more," I said. "He stole $3 million from the Children's Cancer Fund, and his lover just posted a video confessing to felony theft of my property." Silence. "Then, we have enough for warrants. But we need to execute them when they're together so they don't destroy evidence or warn each other." I looked out at the city lights. "Tomorrow night," I said. "The Phoenix Rebirth Gala. They'll both be on stage at 8 p.m. surrounded by press. Vivian is traditional. Excellent at details, sutures, filing, but she lacks big-picture leadership." A smile spread across his face. "She's the perfect support system. The woman behind the man. She has graciously stepped back so I can lead. Her place is in the operating room, not the boardroom." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Kale smirked. In 30 seconds, he erased my legacy, my authority, and my identity, reducing me to an assistant in front of the entire city. The assistant called me. I took out my phone. I didn't send it to cry about it. Later, I forwarded the live stream link directly to Agent Vance at the FBI with a simple caption. "Add this to the file. Public defamation and misrepresentation of corporate structure." I turned and walked away. I had already heard enough. I took the elevator up to the surgical wing. I needed to check on a post-op patient before leaving for the day. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, I heard a commotion near the nurse's station. It was Kale. She was wearing a white blazer, unbuttoned to reveal a lace bralette, and she was shouting at Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson was the head nurse of the surgical floor, 60 years old, a woman who had worked alongside my father for 3 decades. She was hospital royalty, and Kale was pointing a finger in her face. I said I want the suite cleared so my friends can get 4 drips. Kale screamed. They're hungover and need hydration before the gala. Mrs. Johnson stood firm, her expression calm but severe. Miss Hankins, the BP suite is for critical patients. I have a kidney transplant recovery there. I will not move a patient so your friends can recover from a party. Kale stomped her foot. Do you know who I am? I'm the Vice President of Patient Experience. I am your boss, ma'am. Mrs. Johnson sighed, exhausted. Then she looked past Kale and saw me approaching. Her expression softened instantly. Good afternoon, Dr. Brox, she said, nodding respectfully. Kale turned, saw me, and erupted. Why are you talking to her like that? She shrieked. Mrs. Johnson looked back at her. I respect Dr. Brox because she saves lives, Miss Hankins. Respect is earned, not given by sleeping with. The slap echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Kale struck her across the face with all her strength. Mrs. Johnson staggered back, clutching her cheek, her glasses flying onto the linoleum floor. Silence. Doctors, nurses, patients, everyone froze. You're fired. Kale screamed, chest heaving. Pack your things and get out. Nobody talks to me like that. I walked forward. Something inside me was cold and solid. I helped Mrs. Johnson up, picked up her glasses, checked her cheek, already turning red. We did, Henderson said. And we just received the report on the assault of Mrs. Johnson. Vance slid a thick stack of documents across the table. These are federal charges, he said. We have 5 counts of wire fraud against Terrence Brox, 3 counts of embezzlement and conspiracy. We also have a warrant for Sarah Brox for mortgage fraud and complicity. And Kale? I asked. The police chief spoke. We have a state warrant for Kale Hankins. Grand theft, the dress, assault and battery, Mrs. Johnson, and practicing medicine without a license. Minimum sentence, 10 to 15 years. I looked at the papers. Fresh ink signatures at the bottom. Not threats. The end. When do we execute? The chief asked. Tonight? Vance suggested. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. No, I repeated. Tonight is too quiet. They can control the narrative. They can call it a misunderstanding. I leaned forward. I want it tomorrow night. At the gala. 500 civilians will be there, Vance warned. It could be chaotic. That's the point, I said. Terrence wants to be Man of the Year. He wants an audience. I paid $500,000 for that party. I want a show. I want them to reach the peak on stage. On camera. Thinking they've won. And then I want you to walk in. Henderson exhaled slowly. That's cold, Viv. I stood. He missed my father's funeral for oysters in Cabo. He stole cancer drugs from children to buy a Porsche. He hit my head nurse. I looked at them all. Cold isn't the word. This isn't revenge. This is surgical removal of a tumor. That night the city wind hit my face, but I didn't feel it. Only anticipation. The phoenix was about to rise. But it wasn't him. It was me. The St. Jude Medical Center Grand Ballroom had been transformed into a temple of excess. Thousands of imported orchids cascaded from the ceiling. A 3-meter ice sculpture of a phoenix melted slowly into a pool of premium vodka. The air smelled like luxury, truffle oil, and hypocrisy. I stood at the top of the grand staircase. Below me, 500 guests in tuxedos and designer gowns. And the unholy trinity. Terrence stood near the champagne tower, laughing like a man who believed he had already won everything. Kale stood beside him, wearing my dress. It had been butchered into a mid-thigh cocktail dress, uneven and fraying, pinned together with safety pins. It looked cheap, almost tragic. But she looked proud. Sarah moved through the crowd like a shark in silk, convinced she had won. I wore white. A tailored Alexander McQueen suit, sharp enough to cut glass. No jewelry except my wedding ring. I intended to remove it publicly. I began walking down the stairs. Click, click, click. Silence spread through the room like a wave. Eyes turned. Whispers stopped. Even the orchestra faltered. They saw me. The woman who was supposed to be broken. Kale laughed nervously. You look like a ghost in that suit. Terrence leaned closer. Go home. Or I'll have security drag you out. I glanced around the room. Security wasn't moving. No one was. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I paid for this party. And I came to see it end. The lights dimmed. The stage lit up. It's time, a voice whispered through the earpiece. Terrence straightened his tie and walked onto the stage with Kale. Let's make history, he said. I watched them go. From the back, Agent Vance gave me a small nod. Now, he asked. Not yet, I said. Let him climb. On stage, Terrence opened his arms. Welcome to the future of St. Jude, he boomed. Behind him, the screen flickered. And everything began to collapse. The audio was crystal clear. It was the voice of a monster. If you don't sign it, Brenda, I'll terminate you for gross negligence effective immediately. You'll lose your pension. You'll lose your health insurance. The room fell into a deathly silence. This wasn't just drama, it was blackmail. It was a crime. I will make sure you never work in this city again, Terrence's voice threatened from the screen. I glanced toward the VIP table near the front. The councilman, the one Kale had nearly killed, was sitting there. He slowly stood up, his face turning a deep, dark purple. Next to him, the board members I had invited exchanged horrified looks. On stage, Terrence lunged at the laptop on the podium, trying to destroy it. But the video wasn't coming from the podium. It was coming from the control room. Stop it, Terrence shouted, completely unraveling. This is fake. It's AI generated. Stop this now. But the video cut again. This time it wasn't video at all. It was a series of screenshots. Text messages on a familiar background. WhatsApp. The contact name at the top read, Sarah, sister-in-law. A woman in the front row gasped. Sarah, who had been standing proudly near the stage, dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, the sound slicing through the tense silence. The messages scrolled slowly for everyone to read. Terrence is such an idiot. He's so easy to manipulate. I told him Vivian was plotting against him, and he gave me another $5,000. Good job. Keep him paranoid. As long as he thinks he's the king, we can drain the accounts. Do you think he knows about the construction kickbacks? Terrence doesn't know anything unless I tell him. He's just a wallet with an ego. Once we move the money to the Cayman Islands, we can get rid of him too. The screen froze on the last line. He's just a wallet with an ego. The silence in the room was suffocating, the kind that comes right before an explosion. On stage, Terrence turned slowly toward Sarah. She shook her head, stepping backward, hands raised in surrender. It's not real, she screamed. Terrence, she hacked my phone. She changed the messages. You know I love you, we're family. But Terrence just stared at her, eyes filled with betrayal. Then he looked at the screen. Then at the audience. 500 faces stared back, disgusted, stunned, silent. The facade was gone. The phoenix hadn't risen, it had burned alive. Then a sharp scream cut through the air. Turn it off. Kale shrieked. She grabbed a champagne bottle from a passing tray and hurled it at the screen. It bounced off harmlessly and exploded on the floor. "You're ruining my night," she screamed, stomping like a child. "This is my party. I'm the vice president. Stop looking at me like that." She ran to the edge of the stage, pointing into the darkness. "Where are you, Vivian? I know you're doing this. Come out and fight me, coward. You're just jealous because I'm young and beautiful and you're old and alone." Then I stepped out from behind the pillar. The spotlight operator, following my prior instruction, snapped the light onto me. White suit, bright beam, silence. I stopped beneath the stage and looked up at them. At Terrence, clutching the podium. At Kale, mascara streaked, chest heaving. At Sarah, frozen in the front row. "You're not alone," I said quietly. "Look around, Terrence. Look at your friends, your donors, your board members." His eyes darted across the room. Phones were already out. Lawyers already being called. "You did this," he whispered. "No," I said, glancing at my watch. "I just turned the lights on." Then I gestured toward the back doors. "I think your transportation has arrived." The doors slammed open. 6 FBI agents in tactical vests entered first, followed by uniformed police officers. The room erupted into chaos. Agent Vance led them straight down the aisle. Kale tried to run, 2 officers blocked her. Sarah tried to slip away. Mrs. Johnson stepped in front of her, arms crossed. Terrence didn't run. He collapsed. I turned away from the stage. "Take them," I said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was final. "I'm hurting you," Kale complained. The officer then pulled out the handcuffs. "And for the assault on Nurse Johnson," she said. "We have the video, Miss Hankins. You are not a victim. You are a suspect. Turn around." When the cold steel touched Kale's skin, reality finally shattered her delusion. She realized that being young and pretty wasn't going to save her. She realized that the Instagram livestream she had posted would be played in court. "No, no, no," Kale screamed as the cuffs closed. "I can't go to jail. I have a skincare routine. I have allergies. Please, let me call my mom." The officers led her off the stage, guiding her through the crowd. Then the silence broke, camera flashes. The press had arrived. Kale Hankins, the girl who wanted to be famous, was finally getting exactly what she wished for. Her tear-streaked face, ruined dress, and cuffed wrists were immortalized by every photographer in Chicago. I watched it all from the stairs. There was a strange distance to it, like I was observing something that no longer belonged to me. No joy, just a deep, settling sense of balance restored. As if gravity had finally done its job. The weight of their lies had brought them down, and I was the only one left standing because I had been on solid ground the entire time. A waiter, visibly shaken by everything that had just unfolded, walked past the stairs carrying an untouched tray of red wine. "Excuse me," I said softly. He stopped, staring at me wide-eyed. "Yes, doctor." I reached out and took a glass. The crystal was cold against my fingers. The wine was a deep, rich crimson, the color of a heartbeat. I climbed 2 more steps until I was high enough to see the entire hall. I looked toward the exit, where the flashing blue lights of police cars reflected against the glass doors. I saw Terrence being shoved into the back of a black SUV. I saw Kale being guided into a patrol car. I gently swirled the wine in my glass. Then I took a slow, deliberate sip. It tasted like victory. It tasted like freedom. Agent Vance re-entered the room, adjusting his tie. He looked at me and gave a small nod. "It's done, Dr. Brox," he mouthed. I raised my glass to him. Then toward the empty stage. Then toward my father's portrait hanging at the back of the hall. "The king is dead," I whispered into the empty air. I took another sip, feeling warmth spread through my chest. Long live the Queen. The air in Paris smells different from Chicago. It smells like roasted chestnuts, rain on cobblestones, and, most importantly, peace. I am sitting at a small round table outside a cafe in the 7th arrondissement, watching the golden afternoon light strike the iron lattice of the Eiffel Tower. On the table in front of me rests a porcelain espresso cup and a thick stack of leather-bound documents. I pick up my fountain pen. Its weight is familiar, but the hand holding it no longer trembles with rage or grief. I am rewriting it in my own terms. Exactly 365 days have passed since the Phoenix Rebirth Gala, the night I burned my old life to the ground. Sometimes, in the quiet of the city, I think about the people who once lived in that life. Not with longing, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing specimens under glass. 4,000 miles away, in a narrow studio apartment on the south side of Chicago, Sarah is waking up. But she is not waking up in a villa. Not to birdsong in a manicured garden. She wakes to the sound of her upstairs neighbors arguing and a faucet dripping she cannot afford to fix. After the foreclosure, Sarah lost everything. Marcus, the husband she thought would protect her, filed for divorce 3 weeks after the gala. He claimed he knew nothing of her debts, throwing her under the bus to save his own credit score. Now Sarah works as a dental receptionist. She spends her days answering phones and being shouted at by patients. A cruel irony for a woman who once terrorized service workers. She drives a 10-year-old sedan with a rusted bumper. Sometimes, people say she passes by her former house, the one I reclaimed, and just sits on the curb crying. A queen without a castle. A socialite without a circle. Living in the shadow of the bridges she burned. Then there is Kale, the girl who wanted fame. She found it, but not the kind she dreamed of. The video of her arrest in the stolen, ruined dress went viral. 10 million views. A meme was born, the St. Jude Karen. No medical school accepted her. No hospital hired her. Last I heard, she works in a fast food restaurant on the outskirts of the city. I imagine her there now. A polyester uniform, stained with grease. Acrylic nails gone, replaced with short, chipped, unpolished ones due to health code regulations. Yesterday, a former colleague sent me another video. It was filmed by a customer at her workplace. In it, Kale tries to explain to an angry customer that the milkshake machine is broken. The customer, a teenager, gets irritated, laughs, and throws a large soda at her. The dark, sticky liquid splashes across her uniform, dripping down her face. Oops, look at you, the boy laughs. You're a mess. Kale stands there, soaked, humiliated, and for a fraction of a second, she looks at the camera. And I know she remembers. She remembers the hot coffee she threw at me in the hospital lobby. She remembers the laughter. She remembers the power she thought she had. Now the world has returned the favor. It is serving her exactly what she once served me, and she is drowning in it. And finally, there is Terrence, my husband, the CEO, the visionary. He is currently residing at the Federal Correctional Institution in Pekin, Illinois. He was sentenced to 12 years for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Prison has not been kind to Terrence. The narcissism that once served him in boardrooms made him a target in a cell block. The man who once commanded hospitals and galas now lives by rules he cannot manipulate, surrounded by people who are not impressed by titles or power. His fall was not loud anymore. It was slow, contained, final. And in Paris, under a quiet sky, I do not mourn any of it. I simply close the file and move forward. I heard about him from his lawyer. He called me unexpectedly, his voice stripped of its old confidence, almost pleading in a way I had never heard before. Not demanding, not controlling, just small. He wanted a character reference, a sentence, a signature, something that could soften what was coming for him in court. I gave him nothing, not out of anger, out of completion. That was when he hesitated, as if deciding whether I deserved to know the rest. Then he told me. There had been an incident inside the prison block. A card game. A careless insult. He had called another inmate a loser, the same way he used to label people in boardrooms. Efficient. Final. When it was done, Terrence had a fractured jaw. 2 front teeth gone. The perfect veneers he used to flash at cameras, the ones he paid thousands to maintain his illusion of perfection, had been shattered in a moment that no doctor, no PR team, no money could reverse. Now, when he smiles, I'm told it looks like a broken piano. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't need the image completed for me. I understood it too clearly already. The man who once built his identity on appearance had been stripped of it in the most irreversible way. He spends most of his time now in the prison library. Not reading for knowledge. Reading for escape. Writing appeals that go nowhere. Letters addressed to courts that have already moved on from his existence. He repeats the same narrative over and over again. Misunderstood. Wronged. Framed. A man who once believed the world could be negotiated with now discovers it no longer listens. Inside those walls, he is not a CEO, not a husband, not a strategist. He is inmate 8,940, a number filed away in a system that no longer responds to his influence. My phone vibrates on the cafe table, pulling me back into the soft rhythm of Paris. The number is from Illinois. Federal Corrections. Collect call. I don't need to answer to know who it is. It is the anniversary of his arrest. A symbolic date for him, perhaps. A reminder. Or maybe just desperation disguised as ritual. He is calling me. Maybe to beg. Maybe to rage. Maybe simply to hear a voice that once belonged to the life he destroyed. I look at the screen as it continues to ring. For a brief moment, there is a sensation. Not emotion exactly, but memory. A ghost of weight across my chest. 10 years of marriage. Control disguised as partnership. Affection used as leverage. Promises that always came with conditions attached. Then, a waiter approaches my table, careful not to disturb the silence of the moment. He places a fresh croissant beside my coffee and offers a polite smile. Bonjour, madam. Do you need anything else? I look up at him. And for the first time that morning, I smile without effort. No, thank you. I have everything I need. The phone keeps ringing. I don't move to answer it. Instead, I press the side button. Silence. Instant. Clean. Final. I open the contact. Scroll down. Block this caller. Tap. Confirm. A small action. Almost insignificant. And yet it feels like the closing of a door I had left slightly open for years. The screen goes dark. There is nothing left calling me backward. No vibration. No pull. No echo. Only stillness. I take a sip of coffee. It is bitter, warm, perfect. The kind of taste that belongs only to mornings that are no longer haunted. I gather my papers from the table. Legal documents. Contracts. Proof that my life is no longer something I survived, but something I built. I stand and adjust the front of my white linen blazer. The fabric moves easily, no longer weighed down by anything I need to carry. I leave a generous tip on the table. Not as a statement. Not as memory. Just because I can. Outside, Paris is alive in a way that feels almost indifferent to history. The light falls across the stone streets like gold spilled carelessly from the sky. The air smells of roasted chestnuts, espresso, and rain that has not yet arrived, but is already expected. I begin walking. The city does not ask who I used to be. It only responds to who I am now. Each step echoes differently than it once did. Lighter. Certain. Final. Somewhere far away, across oceans and borders, there is a man sitting behind reinforced glass and steel, writing letters that will never reach the lives he once tried to control. And here, in this city, there is only forward motion. I walk toward the Seine. The river moves without hesitation, without regret, without memory of the shapes it has already passed. I follow it. Dr. Vivian Brox.